Hey guys, what's going on? Zazubar here, and I am here to give my quick initial gut reactions to Season 8, Episode 1 of Doctor Who. The premiere of the new season and the premiere of the brand new Doctor as portrayed by Peter Capaldi. Not Peter Capaldi as I've been thinking for the past, year now since he was first announced as the Doctor. Apparently it's Peter Capaldi. That's how he says it, that's how everybody says it, so I guess it's Peter Capaldi. So, regardless of his name, he is the brand new 12th Doctor following Matt Smith. So, I'm not going to make this very long because I kind of want to keep this kind of initial gut reactions, and you'll see why when I get into it. So I'm just going to give my kind of initial first reactions to both him as the Doctor now and both the episode as a whole and where it looks like this new season's going to go and this new era for Doctor Who is going to go. So let's just get into it. So Doctor Who Series 8 Episode 1, Deep Breath. What are my thoughts? Well, the first thing I noticed that I didn't expect is that its duration, the episode's actual length, was actually closer to one of the Christmas specials or one of the overall specials like Day of the Doctor, or one of the Tennant, as Dylan calls them, Farewell of Death specials. It's over an hour. I think it's about an hour 40, which is typical Christmas special type length, so usually season premieres don't do this for Doctor Who, unless it's a Christmas special or some other kind of special. For all of the David Tennant years, the openings of the season were feature length like that because they were Christmas specials. So I thought it was kind of interesting that this one took that approach. I think part of that is that Doctor Who really has exploded in the past year or so. And the whole pomp and circumstance surrounding this first episode really befit something that would be feature length. I mean, it's being released in theaters. It's crazy. It is insane how popular Doctor Who has become and how hyped up this first episode was, this new Doctor was, everything about it. So the question I asked myself having gotten done with the episode is, did it deserve that length and did it use it to its advantage? And I'll say this, I need to rewatch it again without commercials because I watched it on BBC America, obviously, and oh boy, those commercials killed me. Just 10-minute blocks of commercials interrupting the episode. And I've never had, the only other time I've had to watch Doctor Who that way is when I watched Time of the Doctor. Because I'm just coming off of binge watching it last year on Netflix and in other places when Season 7 wasn't available on Netflix at that time, as it is now. So I'm still getting used to watching Doctor Who with commercial breaks, and it's really, really weird and not a good way to watch something that incredibly plot-driven and incredibly complex in terms of its plot. I mean, this episode wasn't one of Doctor Who's more complex plots, honestly. It was fairly straightforward, especially since it was technically, I guess this is a spoiler, so I'll save this for later on, but the plot wasn't one of Doctor Who's most complex, nor should it have been, because it's the new Doctor's first episode. Not that they can't be complex, but especially when it's a new Doctor following a very popular, very long-running Doctor's career, it's really good to sit down and focus on this new personality for the Doctor. Work out who he is now, what he's like, and what is his era going to behold to fans. And I thought that being the focus was good, because it really was the focus. In fact, my biggest criticism of the episode was it took a really long time for the plot to get going in terms of the villain plot, and once it finally got going, I just said, finally, we're finally moving on. And I'll say this, in regards to this being Stephen Moffat's second time that he's written a post-regeneration Doctor Who episode, it's not as good as the 11th Hour. Now, that doesn't mean that I necessarily like Peter Capaldi's Doctor any less than I liked Matt Smith. That's not my point. My point is, both as a reintroduction episode and both as an episode overall, the 11th Hour is so much tighter, has a much more interesting story, and really got so much done in so little time, and I will always respect it for that, even over David Tennant's first episode and any other Doctor's previous regeneration episode. It was tight, it was to the point, and it made you fall in love with the 11th Doctor in a very short amount of time. That episode had a lot more story in it than this one did as well. But again, they're doing different things. This one is very much so, and I think this one kind of had to be because it was a series of firsts for Doctor Who, and at least first for a very long time, and first in New Who. It was the first time we've had an older Doctor in a long time. You know, it's the first time we've had a new Doctor in 4 years. It's for a lot of fans, including myself, it's the first time we're going to see it. We saw a new Doctor, somebody replacing Matt Smith. So I think that, bearing that in mind and all the things that have changed over the past 4 years, they really wanted to hammer down and focus on the new Doctor. And in that way, it is quite effective. I really, really liked this episode, despite the things I just complained about. Yes, the story isn't that complex, but the story as it stands is very, very competent and very, very fun. Which is strange because it's a much darker Doctor Who story, I guess. Everybody's been talking about for the past however long we've known anything about the 12th Doctor that he's going to be the darkest, most grimiest Doctor yet. And I guess, I mean, I would say to the people who thought that, he's about as dark as Eccleston was. He's a little bit less. And again, I'm going to try and avoid spoilers with this. We'll get probably more into spoilers on the Demons from Outer Space podcast later in the week, so if you want to hear my spoiler thoughts, wait for that. I'm just going to do non-spoiler right now. I would say the term would be unreliable, as some sources and Doctor Who reviewers have been saying. I would agree with that. He's certainly not as reliable or even as trustworthy as previous Doctors have been. You know, a previous Doctor, it'll be like, oh, he'll make a mistake, but it's like, of course he's going to get out of it. And that happens in this as well, but the way Capaldi plays it and the way the script is written, it's not really, you're not sure if he's going to come through for you in the end. And that's a major, major part of the episode. And ultimately, having just watched it, and again, this is gut reactions, I might change, all of what I'm saying might change when I watch it, not with commercials and later down the road, maybe after we've gotten a few more episodes. It's much more of Clara's story than it is the Doctor's. I mean, the Doctor does everything the Doctor always does. He saves the day. He finds out what's going on with the villain plot. He explains the villain plot. He does what the Doctor should do. But ultimately, the point of view we follow everything from is, for the most part, Clara's. I'm not saying she's in every scene, but she's in most of it, and usually we see things through her eyes, which I think is kind of cool because, and I think kind of necessary when we're getting a brand new Doctor like this, because ultimately we share the perspective of Clara in this situation. We follow it from her eyes because we, just as she is, are learning about the Doctor again for the first time. We get to experience the new Doctor in the same way that she does. Unsure if he's the same man that she's always known, scared, nervous that, you know, this may not be the Doctor that you've always known and loved. It might be he might be a completely different man. And it's kind of scary, and it should be, especially with this dark of a Doctor. Again, I don't think he's nearly as dark as people have made him out to be. I think that's a good thing. I didn't want, like, a psychotic, you know, unlikable Doctor. I don't know what the point of that would be. I don't understand why. Some people have been like, oh, I want him to be completely unlikable. It's like, well, why? What do you gain from that? Sure, it's not really been done, but it hasn't been done because it's probably a bad idea. And again, he's certainly darker than Matt Smith and David Tennant was, and I think that was the point, was that a lot of people criticize Matt Smith for kind of just doing the same thing that David Tennant did, but he's a little bit crazier. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I understand the sentiment, and I certainly wanted a little bit of a darker Doctor with this particular Doctor, and we get that, absolutely. It's a return to Eccleston. It's a little bit of a return to Hartnell, even, I would say, in terms of unreliability. He's not the superhero that he's been for the past couple seasons, and I think that's, again, there's nothing wrong with that inherently, but it can get a little boring, and I think that's not the case here at all. He's a lot more of the classical adventurer with who happens to have a moral guideline that he tries to follow but can't always. And that also is a big part of the episode, and they do something really cool with it. So I did really enjoy this, and I think that if it continues in this direction, we're gonna get some great Doctor Who stories. It was an interesting one, to say the least, because and I'm gonna try and talk about this without spoiling it. It was a callback to a previous Doctor Who story that I didn't see coming, and I was like, wow, they're doing a sequel to that in this? That's cool. I didn't expect it, and they did it really well. It was a very interesting story. And what I like about it that should always be done, or not, maybe not always, but is always the best thing to do when writing a Doctor Who story, is you write the alien villain, whatever it is, plot to parallel what the Doctor is going through. It's kind of like how House is written. You write the illness and the disease and what's going on with the people who are suffering from the disease in order to parallel what's going on with House and the characters. It's the same thing in Doctor Who, and they do that here beautifully. So I really enjoyed that about it. What else should I talk about? So I want to get all the positives out of the way first, because there's a couple negative things that I'll save towards the end that aren't spoilers. Again, not non-spoilers. I adore Peter Capaldi. I gotta get used to saying that now. Peter Capaldi as the Doctor. Let's talk about that for a minute. He is, to quote Christopher Eccleston, who I've been talking about a little bit, he is fantastic. He's great. He's everything you want him to be. He's definitely the Doctor, which, again, I think something that people were scared of when they heard how dark he was going to be. And I was certainly nervous about it, too. I was like, he's going to be this unreliable, apparently unlikable guy who happens to... who's really alien. And it's like, yes, those aspects are played up more. And he's, again, definitely darker than he's been for the past 2 regenerations, but he's still the Doctor. And that is what's important, kids. And that's what they retain. And it makes things recognizable, but also it makes things new. Doctor Who feels new again, and I think that's fantastic. That's awesome. It feels like a brand new, fresh show with a fresh direction, and that's awesome. You don't know where it's gonna go, but it still feels like Doctor Who, and that's what Capaldi brings to it. That's what his performance brings into it. He's hilarious. He's threatening. He's fascinating. He's genius. He's everything you want. He just happens to be really intimidating. And I loved this isn't really a spoiler. It's more of it's a very specific thing that out of context won't make any sense. And if you've been following Doctor Who for the past year or so, you'll get this joke. I love the joke about the eyebrows. It's hysterical. And that's what a lot of people were saying about Doctor Who. Is like, oh, about Peter Capaldi as the Doctor, was like, oh god, his eyebrows are terrifying, and they are, and they make a joke about that. I love all of the visual symbolism about the regeneration. That's all fantastic. His character takes a little bit of time to get going, is I think the problem that this might have in the echoes of Who history, is that it might be criticized by fans as being a little bit slow to get to the Doctor, so to speak, because with every regeneration there's always a period where he's really past the regeneration where he's kind of insane, and they do that here. It's a little bit more prolonged, and I think part of that is because Peter Capaldi played it so well, is that they prolonged it a little bit past what it's always been, and it might go on, it might wear on a little long for some people. See, I say some people, I'm not saying for me, because I don't know yet. Again, I have to rewatch this without commercials, because that really affects how you think it's paced. It certainly affected how I perceived Time of the Doctor, which I liked a lot more the second time I saw it without commercials. I still think it's got problems, but I enjoy it more. This, I'll probably have the same thing. I think it's better than I'm remembering it now because of the commercials, but we'll see. And again, not to say that I thought it was bad. I thought it was great, but it might be better than I'm actually remembering because of the fucking commercials. Anyway, let's get off the commercials. So back to Peter Capaldi. He gets some great funny lines in this. I won't spoil them for you, partially because I don't want to ruin the experience for you, but also I don't really remember a lot of them. Not that they're unmemorable, I just don't remember them. I remember a few, but again, I won't spoil them for you. He's hysterical. They do, in terms of calling back to what just happened in Time of the Doctor, there's not much of it in the present day. There are a couple of key moments where the events of Time of the Doctor are very important to the current plot, but it's more of it's more about the Doctor learning who he is now, and that it's very focused on that and not so much on what's going on in the wider scheme of the story. They've got a whole season to do that, and I'm sure they'll get into it. As with the ending of this really confused me. I'm sure they'll get into it. The endings of all of Season 6 confused the shit out of me until they finally explain that, so I'm sure this will be a similar thing. I want to talk briefly about the fan build-up, because there was a lot of talk about what this Doctor was going to be like, and there was a lot of like fan renderings of what he might be like. There were a couple fan movies made regarding the new Doctor. I remember there was one great one by a YouTuber named John Smith, who does a lot of really high quality Doctor Who stuff. He's the guy who made the Who Lock. I think that's what it was called. Little CG mini thing where Sherlock met the Doctor. And he did something with the 12th Doctor after a couple images were released of him. But because of that, you went in with a lot of preconceived notions about this new Doctor. And again, a lot of it is accurate. He's darker, as I said earlier. He's not the superhero he's been. But the biggest thing in terms of what fans were talking about was Peter Capaldi's previous roles, mainly Malcolm Tucker from... Oh, I wish I could remember the name of the show. I don't watch the show, so I don't remember the name. He played this character named Malcolm Tucker in this political drama, and he was one of the Prime Minister's cabinet members, I guess. I'm not sure what they call it in British political speak. And he played this very abrasive, constantly screaming, angry, scary politician dude. And he plays, and everybody thought, oh, his Doctor is going to be terrifying. And he actually, shockingly, I thought there would be none of that character in the new Doctor. There's a little bit of it. It takes a little while for him to get to like being the Doctor again. So once he gets there, there are a couple great moments where you get to see that really intimidating, like, this guy is scary. And I pity anybody who stands opposed to him in the coming season, because he is scary. And there's a couple moments where that intimidation is used for comedy, where he's so off-the-wall imposing that even if what he's saying is complete horseshit or completely insane, you believe it because he's completely intense. He's an intense actor. His acting ability is incredible. His performance is awesome. I loved him. Again, there's not much to say. We don't give really... In terms of in terms of his characterization, partially because I don't want to spoil things, but also because we haven't gotten a real deep look at it yet. We'll see how that develops over time, as the season goes on. So it's an ongoing thing. So we'll see. This is getting a little longer than I intended, so I will wrap this up. So a couple criticisms I wanted to point out. One is the CGI, but more to the point, the cinematography. It's not badly directed, but there are a lot of really bizarre camera angles. And they're camera angles that don't work because it feels like they're trying to work around the special effects or work around the set, it seems more of the times, when they're in Victorian London. And whatever, it's Doctor Who. Of course, the budget isn't befitting of something like Transformers, but so the special effects aren't going to be of that quality. But the camera angles in this seemed like they were trying to... It seemed really obvious that they were trying to avoid showing things that they couldn't show. So, for instance, Peter Capaldi falling out of a tree. It was completely disorienting. I had no idea what was going on. And... Thank God the scene didn't last that long because I couldn't interpret it. And there were a couple of scenes like that. There were a couple of just weird camera angles and weird camera moves that just annoyed the crap out of me. That's one of them. There's one in the opening where, listen, to future filmmakers out there, if you don't have to do a dead-on character looking at the camera shot in a movie, don't, because it looks really awkward and it completely takes the audience out of the movie. And there's one shot of that in this episode, and it drove me insane. It doesn't last long, it's a complete nitpick, but it drove me crazy, because you just don't do that. It's not good filmmaking. It takes the audience out of out of the story you're telling. If you want to hear a movie that did it a lot, I'll point you to that movie, and I've reviewed it before, so you'll know how I feel about the movie overall. Beverly Hills Cop 3 did it a lot, and it didn't work. And that movie was a comedy, and it wasn't funny. And it's just something you should never do. If you go to any film school, that's what they will teach you. If you ask any person who operates a camera more than once in their lives, they will tell you that you shouldn't do that because it just looks weird. Unless you're a news broadcaster or you're trying to address the audience, you just shouldn't do it because it looks awkward. But again, that was one shot, but it drove me crazy. I also mentioned the special effects. They're really good. There's a lot of CG in this. It looks pretty good. Obviously, if you've seen the trailers, there's a big CGI special effect in the episode, and it looks good. It doesn't look perfect. It's not of the caliber of a movie that might feature something like, oh, screw it, I'm gonna say it. There's a dinosaur. There's a big T-Rex. And hey, Dylan, if you're listening, they never specify that it's a T-Rex, so it might be something else. What now? Anyways, that was for a very specific person. But to the general listenership, there's a T-Rex, and it looks good. It looks passable. It looks like a T-Rex, or a dinosaur, I suppose. It doesn't look half bad at all. But it wears out its welcome a little bit, and there's something that happens to it in the episode, something later on that doesn't look that great. And again, I don't know how you get around it, but it was definitely a little distracting. And I think that Doctor Who, going forward, really ought to lean more on its practical effects, because when it does a lot of CG, it sometimes looks very creaky. Day of the Doctor suffered from this a little bit, having just rewatched it. That episode's great. It's got a great effects budget. It almost looks film quality, but there are some moments where they're trying to do things that they just can't on their budget that just look too creaky, and it takes you out of it. There's a couple moments of that in this, but not nearly as many, because it's much more of a low-key story. That being said, there are some fantastic practical effects in this. The villain looks great. The villains look great. Madame Vastra, as always, looks great. That makeup is completely impervious. It looks amazing. Strax, of course, looks great. Everything is just the TARDIS of what little we see of it, especially the new TARDIS interior, even though it's not that different. It's a little bigger, and it's a little bit more red, and that's not really a spoiler. That's in all the trailers, so it's not really a spoiler. It's a little redder and a little bigger. That's about it. But otherwise, it looks great. So because this is wearing on longer than I wanted it to, I am going to wrap things up by saying this. This is far from the greatest Doctor Who episode ever. It is a good one, though. It's very, very well written. Of course, it's Stephen Moffat. He's a genius, and this isn't one of his best episodes, but it's certainly good and certainly enjoyable. It's very entertaining. It's a good introduction to the new Doctor. It could be a little bit more fast-paced, but again, I'm not sure if that's because of the way I watched it or if it's actually more slowly paced than it needs to be. So we'll see. I'm not sure. I'll have to check back when I rewatch it. But as it stands, good episode, really enjoyable. New season looks great. New Doctor looks great. Everything is in place for a great new season. And the ending of this episode had me giggling like a fangirl. I'm going to admit that. So to those of you who haven't seen it yet, who are listening to this, you'll be doing that if you're a Doctor Who fan. If you're not a Doctor Who fan, this ain't a bad introduction. It doesn't really require a lot of previous knowledge, except for the ending. But if you ask Whovians a couple questions, you'll probably have things cleared up. So it's not a bad introduction, which again is a good thing because it's a new Doctor and it's a new season, so it befits that as well. So awesome. That's always good as well. With that being said, that is going to do it for my gut reactions to Doctor Who Series 8, Episode 1, Deep Breath, Peter Capaldi's first episode as the 12th Doctor. So until next time, kids, I am Zazibar, but I'm going to leave you with this. If you want to hear my spoiler thoughts on this episode and on the new Doctor and everything, be sure to listen to the Demons from Outer Space podcast, the podcast I do with Dylan McCandless, one of my best buddies in the whole world and my fellow SOS member. Be sure to listen to that podcast in order to hear me talk about that. So be sure to listen to that when it comes. So until we meet again, kids, I bid you a good night.